Now, depending on what you're photographing, you might not have a situation like this where you have a lot of really small detailed areas that would be kind of complex to mask out. But if you do have a situation like this, then this video is for you. So typically what I would do is I'd go and use the magic wand or something like that. But you can see that this is going to take a really long time to try to get those really complex areas masked out. And the other problem with it is that doing a selection mask like that will sometimes give me a little bit more of a halo than I really want. So there's another way I can try to go about masking something like this. So first I'm going to go over to my channels. So next to your layers you should have the channels. If you don't see that, go to Window and pull up Channels. And channels basically is going to break your image down into RGB colors. So this is the red channel, this is the blue channel, and this is the, green channel, and this is the blue channel. So if we were going to say screen print this, actually if you're screen printing, you'd probably use CMYK. But if we're gonna make these like screens, you would basically break your image up into these 3 different colors in the case of RGB. And so what I want to do is I want to look through these and see which one has the highest contrast. So this one right here, the blue one, has the highest contrast between those sort of little sticks of wheat sticking out and the background. The green one is sort of a close second, so I'm going to stick with the blue. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make a mask of this layer. So first what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to generate a whole new channel so that I can use calculations to try to increase the contrast of that, to use that as a mask. So I have the blue channel selected, and then I go to Image and down to Calculations. And as soon as I do that, depending on how it's set, how it was last set up, it's going to default to kind of maybe making it look the same or a little bit more. But basically what it's doing is it's looking at the blue channel and it's combining it with the blue channel using vivid light. So I could try to make this a little bit more subtle. So if it's set to normal, it's not actually combining this. So I'm combining the blue channel basically with itself. So I could do multiply, I could do color burn. So I just want to make it as high contrast as possible. So I'm just going to go through and check out these different options. Now linear light is good, but the thing is some of these grains of wheat are a little bit lighter, so I'm kind of losing them. So I might just go back to linear burn. The other thing I can try to do is try to change this to green. So if I change this to green, I get a slightly higher contrast image, but I think I'll go ahead and leave it at blue. All right, and now finally, what I want it to do is create a new channel. So I'm gonna say, okay, and there it's gonna make that new channel. All right, cool. So what I wanna do now is go through and try to increase the contrast of these little grains. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Image, Adjustments, and go to Levels. And I'm just going to try to pull up the darkness and pull down the lightness to try to increase that contrast between those little grains and the background. So I might have to play around with the middle gray slider a little bit too, something like that. All right, cool. So that works pretty good. And finally, what I can do is I can also come in and say maybe draw over some of these areas. So I do want them to be masks. So I grab my Wacom tablet, I'll grab my brush, make this a little bit smaller, make sure I know which color I'm drawing with. So I'm going to toggle that and make sure the opacity is a little higher. So I'm just going to go through and kind of make sure that I'm not going to lose some of those highlights. All right, so that looks pretty good. It's probably about as good as I'm going to get. Now this is really tricky because of that shadow on the ground, but I'm going to just work with it as it is. I might do one more adjustment on this, so I might go back and do a sort of brightness and contrast with this and set it to Legacy. Try to increase the contrast a little bit. Try to get rid of some of those middle grays. That works pretty well. All right, so there, I'm basically ready to start masking this. So what I'm going to do now is go back to my layers. I'll make sure all these guys are selected again. And I'm going to add a mask to that guy. And I'm going to go to Select, Load Selection. And I don't have any particular selections loaded, but it does generate that alpha channel that I made as a mask. So I can go ahead and load that. And there that mask is. So now I can go through and I can grab my eraser, and I'm actually gonna delete that background. And I can come in and sort of clean up around where those sheaves of wheat are. So I don't really need to worry about the shadows and stuff like that, because that'll actually be a little bit easier to mask, just, manually in other ways. So I am gonna do a little bit like that. There we go. So that's not too horrible. Now, the thing that would have made my life easier is if I'd had a better photograph to begin with. So, rule of thumb, try to get a good photograph. Now, finally, with calculations, sometimes you can get pretty good results, but sometimes you get weird little sort of halos behind things. So if I shade this background layer, you can see that it's got a lot of sort of light halos around it. There's different ways that I can fix them, and in the link that I'm going to provide, you can see different methods and examples for how you can use calculations to help fix them. But in this case, what I did is I duplicated the sort of cluster of layers that I used to create this. So this folder has 2 layers in it. I've just duplicated it, and I've changed the name to be Bold Destructive, and then I'm turning off the other one so I don't get distracted by it. And then with Bold Destructive selected, I'm going to go to Layer and then down to Merge Group. So now this has made a destructive layer change. You can see that there's no mask on this anymore. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Burn and Dodge. So there's not going to be anything animated behind it. So I really just need to make sure that it looks okay against this coat. So it looks all right, most of it, except down here where the wool behind it is a little bit darker. So there I'm going to grab the Burn tool. I've already pulled down the exposure to about 25%. And what the burn tool does is it takes anything that's either a shadow, a midtone, or a highlight, whatever you set it to be, and it's going to make it a little bit darker. So I'm just going to go ahead and burn down those midtones just around that wheat so it's not quite so pronounced. And then I might go ahead and change it to highlights too. So I'm just going to make it a little bit darker. So here there's some pixelation where my masking was a little overkill. So in this case, I'm making another destructive change. I'm going to grab the blur tool, and I'm just going to blur those pixels out a little bit. So this is getting into detail work that most people probably won't notice, but I want to make sure that it looks pretty good. So I'm just going to blur that out just a little bit. So once I'm done with that, I can sort of go back in and think about other changes I can make. So for instance, like these candles, they have a little bit of a halo around them. So I can use sort of the same techniques that I had before. I need to figure out which candle that is first. It's this one, right? So I'll control click, say add mask to selection. So Shift Command I will invert a selection. So now I can try that again. So expand. All right. And then I can take my eraser, make sure I'm on the mask, and just sort of really gently kind of go over. And I might want to pull down the opacity on that a little bit too. So this is not quite, this is not a destructive change. I could come through and do that same burning, but then I'd have to make a copy of this. And I don't really need to do that. I just want to get rid of the most obvious halo around that candle. So I can hit deselect, and that's quite a bit better than it was before.